Hi, welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. Super excited to be bringing back the panel from last year. But before we get into that, let's get some housekeeping sorted out. This is being broadcasted via StreamYard. So if somebody could just put a comment in the comments box, give me a thumbs up, give me something so I know that you can hear me okay and see me okay. Okay, looks like I'm getting the thumbs up. So last year we hosted our first CEO panel, and then everybody was kind enough to come back and do a one-on-one. You guys have asked me to bring them back. We've come out of the pandemic, and now everyone's talking about the R word. And what does that mean? So you've asked me to bring the panel back, and that's what I've done. Um, Great, I can see people logging in now, so that's good. So let me just clear that. All good. Okay, perfect. So let's bring everybody in. So we have Janelle. We have with us today Travis, Craig, and Mark. So before we dive straight in, if we could just quickly give everybody just a couple of bites on who you are, for those of them that don't know you. So if you start with yourself, Janelle.
Absolutely, Suki. I'm Janelle Beeler. I'm the president of Adecco Canada. I have been with Adecco for about 8 years, and I've been fortunate to spend the last 2 years in Canada in taking an international assignment. So thank you so much for having me back. I'm happy to be here with my fellow panelists today.
Great. And Travis, yourself?
Hi, everyone. Travis O'Rourke with Hayes, president of our Canadian business based in Toronto today, and equally pleased to be invited back and share the stage with our panelists. I hope this isn't much of a debate, Suki. I'm not looking to get into a scrap here. You never know.
You never know with these panels, right?
Yeah.
So, Craig, what about yourself?
Morning. I'm Craig Brown, CEO of Agilus Work Solutions, one of the largest staffing and recruitment organizations in Canada, sitting in beautiful Mississauga, Ontario today, and happy to be here.
And last but not least, Mark.
Greetings. This is London calling. I'm Mark Kutsia. I work for Drake International. I work hand in hand with our chairman across all our businesses, across Planet Drake, as we call it, to drive performance improvement. I hear you, Travis. It's always you and I get into a bit of a tiff, so I think you've set the stage. We're not in for a debate, but if we are, they'll be good. Great to be back. Awesome to have the rest of the panelists here. I hear they're all doing great jobs up in the Great White North, and I have to say I miss Canada desperately. Fantastic country, fantastic place. Wonderful to be back.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And I truly do appreciate everybody taking time out. So why don't we just dive straight in? So, Janelle, my first question comes to yourself. Over the last year, we've seen a return to office for pretty much all employees. What's the differences you're seeing now in terms of interest in being back in the office? What have you seen work, and what have you seen work? What have you seen work regarding remote work, hybrid, fully, and the office structure? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think our thoughts on the whole work from home and remote work has changed a lot now that we're fully out of the pandemic. I think when I look at companies and leadership, I think there's a general sense that people are wanting things to go back to how it used to be, especially leaders that have maybe been pushed in to managing remote that weren't comfortable with it. I think you have two different types of leaders, some that are very comfortable with managing productivity remotely, that maybe had dispersed workforces before. And then you have the other side of that coin where people were kind of pushed into this way of managing, and they are missing being able to have eyes on colleagues and being able to do the side-by-side coaching and wanting people to kind of be back in that environment where they have eyes on what's happening. I think it's also interesting on the colleague side, because I think you also have two sides to that. Some colleagues are really enjoying having the flexibility of either being hybrid or remote, and other people are yearning to come back into an office, and they want that excitement of being side by side with people and that energy that kind of comes from working in the office. So as I'm talking with people within our own organization and also clients that we work with, we're kind of seeing both sides to that. I don't think that remote work is going away. I think that there is going to be a place for that no matter what happens. But I do think that there's the three different work models, and every company is sort of coming to this place where they're figuring out what works best for them. Whether it's looking at colleagues in a hybrid situation and saying what has to actually be done face to face. Like in our industry, there are certain functions that just work better when we are face to face. And there are other things that we can completely do remote. And getting on a Teams meeting with our teams maybe doesn't always have to be directly in the office. So I'm finding kind of this shift now to companies that are really trying to figure out what are the things we can do and be flexible about, and then what are those moments where we have to bring people into an office. I think too, I was really thinking about what are the three things I've seen that have made companies successful with managing across, because I don't think any company is just 100% remote or 100% hybrid. It's almost depending on position. And where I've seen things that have really worked is when companies are focused on purposeful collaboration. So when they are finding ways to bring people into an office that makes it fun, or there's a reason to come in. So instead of trying to force everybody to come in every single day, saying, hey, maybe once a month when we do our town halls, we're going to bring all of our colleagues together and we're going to make it fun. It's a chance to work together all day and to get some excitement out of it versus trying to make people feel like they have to be there 5 days. And then I think, secondly, you also have kind of a creation of structure that seems to be working. So when companies are able to really define, like I said, what needs to be remote and what can be in person, I've seen a lot of success when there's a lot of clarity on what that looks like and what happens in the office and what can happen remotely. And then lastly, the thing that I'm consistently hearing in terms of engaging, because we hear that quiet quitting, right, is quite a big term right now. And I think when you have people that work remote or hybrid, you run into the chance of people disengaging more easily because they're not part of a day-to-day culture. And so one of the things that I consistently keep hearing is show them you care, reaching out to people, making the extra effort, having conversations, whether you're leadership or colleague, reaching out colleague to colleague and trying to build those connections, I think is also making a difference for those that aren't back in an office 5 days a week.
Interesting. What are your thoughts, Travis?
I was almost the first person to have to be told you're on mute. Thank you for resisting, Mark. I appreciate that. The honest, what in life isn't better with balance, I suppose. So I think Janelle, you made some great points. Some people like being in the office. I like to be in the office every day. I like walking down Yonge Street, feeling some of that energy, standing in line at Starbucks, having a chat with a stranger. But I also like working from home and dropping my kids off at school in the morning or in the evening. And I think great example today in Ontario, where a lot of the schools are closed or on strike, and having the infrastructure within an organization or within your management or within your training where you can accommodate that on a snap is critical. A business can't survive today if you can't move and pivot quickly. So I think the hybrid environment is probably best, at least it is for Hayes. But on LinkedIn this morning, I saw one of my colleagues, Taylor. She usually works outside. She's decided to work in Chile for the next week, so she's there on vacation. Last week, she was working from an island in Mexico. And how cool is that? Because Janelle, you're right. There's some things that need to be done face to face. And I really do believe that recruiters, when you're first hired and you're starting in the business, you learn most from listening to the person next to you and how they handle situations. But when you're a seasoned vet and you've been doing it for 5-10 years, like Taylor has, why not work remotely? Why not enjoy your life to the fullest? So I think balance is key. And I completely agree with Janelle that it really depends on the task of the day.
Craig, what about yourself?
I think it's a hard question, and I think everybody's still learning, to Janelle's point, right? Like it's new. So we've gone through this pandemic, we're out of the pandemic, and most companies are trying some version of a hybrid model, and it works for 2 people, might not work for 3, and trying to balance all those things, right? Because our role, in our organizations really is to unleash the potential of our teams, our people, our individuals, as well as the organization. And I don't think there is an official answer yet. And I think that's part of the challenge for leaders, is it's such a personal and professional balance of working in the office and remote and hybrid and whatever works. And I think it'll be iterative. So for us, it's an iterative process. We've tried something and we're going to learn from it, and then we'll update it, and then we'll continue to iterate until we find the right balance for everybody in our organization as well as the company. But I actually think it's tough. It's probably the number one question or conversation point with any executive in any industry I speak to is, what are you doing? What's working? What's not working? And also to Janelle's point is, how are you helping your leaders lead it and manage it? Because it's a whole different paradigm for a leader to make sure their team's engaged and being successful in what they're supposed to be doing. So this is a question we'll be asking ourselves, I think, for the next 5 years.
I don't think there is. No one's ever going to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's definitely, there is not a right or wrong. And I don't think any leader is going to get it 100% right, because that means satisfying 100% of your team, right? Mark, what do you think?
Firstly, Travis, I'm disgusted that you went to Starbucks and not Tim Hortons. Sellout. And then everything that Janelle said. And so it is, and Craig is right, it is a very tough question. And if I look at all the companies that are working with across Planet Drake in all different continents, there's a massive variation from country to country. For example, if we look at some of the Asian countries, they want to come to the office, even though you're open to have the hybrid model. They love that collaboration, the connectivity, the rah-rah every day, the hustle and bustle of the office. And there's economic reasons for them not wanting to work the hybrid model. We must remember, in some of those countries, we've got folks living 6, 7 in a house. They're living 2-3 hours out of the city. They have very poor internet connection, even though we've, as an organization, have stepped up and helped them assist with that in terms of funding and try and get in a better infrastructure. They want to come to those offices for those reasons, because they don't have the space to work at home. With many of us have a luxury of a home office and so on. So sort of that part of the world is a little different. But if we let's call it the Western culture, or Western countries, if you will, or first world countries, I think it depends on the service line. I have a saying is, you've got to go where the candidates are. And what do the candidates want? At the end of the day, for example, if you're in the industrial business and we've got to register many candidates, and they're hard, and we know the industrial business is brutal right now. There's a candidate shortage. It's first one to get those quality candidates, put them out of market. And the best way to do that is in connecting with them face to face and getting to hang out and be with them. So I'm finding on our industrial service lines, going back into the office and building that model is leaning a lot more towards being in the office, as opposed to, let's call it, the white-collar recruitment, which can really be driven from a hybrid perspective or remote. We've got some business units here in the UK. We've totally shut the offices. We've experimented, and it's working extremely well with our white-collar recruitment pieces, where our teams are just working from home. And it's working well. And also, I think there's another caveat to this is, yes, we need to care about the people, absolutely. But at the end of the day, we're also in business to make money. We all have lords and masters we report into and expecting massive returns now coming out of COVID. And at the end of the day, if we've been working a hybrid model or a work from home model, and it's not profitable month on month, year on year, you've got a problem. So we've got, it's either the people, the process, or we've got to haul everybody, unfortunately, indoors and almost started from scratch. And we can't just accept that's the way we're going to work forever if the results aren't there. So that, you know what, as I always say, the numbers tell the story. If the numbers are good, it's working. If it's not, you got to fix it. And that may mean getting everybody, unfortunately, come back to the office. Over to you.
Well, I was in London last week, and the hustle and bustle, right? Work hours, evening. It was like the pandemic had never happened, right? Trying to get on the subway was a nightmare. And I felt as if people had returned back to London from the office perspective. Not so much here, but one of the things I'm hearing everywhere, there's talk of this R word, the recession happening. And I'm seeing a little bit of a fear in leaders, and they kind of start saying, well, maybe if we had done the hybrid model and with the work from home people, they're starting to push them back into the office. So I think we're going to see more pressure on people in certain regions to come back into the office, which in itself is going to create a secondary problem. Does anybody else see that? Or
Well, Suki, can I just answer the London situation? We
Yep.
must understand the UK is a mess. I got on a plane once. We had a prime minister called Boris. When I landed, we had a female in power. I took off the next day on business. When I got back, we had someone in power. So nobody really knows what's going on here. It's an absolute mess. But that R word you keep on using, I think there is an element of fear. I think it's being unnecessarily stoked. The fire's been stoked. I think there's opportunity still for growth in certain service lines. But I think in terms of people feeling fearful that they need to almost come back to the office, it's because that recession word is there. So if I come to the office and show that I'm there every day and I show up, hopefully I won't be made redundant. So there's all unnecessary fear factor here. And we're losing that care about the people piece. And so I think there's a lot of unnecessary nonsense about this recession. And we need to keep our eye on it. And I don't want to downplay the cost of living that's gone up everywhere and the difficulty in people finding more people to move, etc., etc. It is tough out there, but we must start being a lot more positive. We must reflect back on where we were 2-3 years ago to where we are now and not get ourselves into a flat panic and actually start work our way through this. Because if we could cope through COVID, we can cope through anything.
And if I could add to that, Suki, too, there's almost a psychology to a recession, right? If you say recession often enough, it is a recession, and regardless of what's going on in the market, to Mark's point. So, it's important to look to the things that kind of the positive things that we can take care of. And ultimately, there's still talent shortages across the board and opportunity for everybody. And we all play a role in helping that happen.
But what about all these companies that are just starting to put everything on hold? Because we are seeing that, right? And as I'm sure you are with your clients. And I often wonder how much of that is contributing to this fear of recession, right? So leaders are, and I know it's a generalizing sweeping statement, but leaders are suddenly just saying, okay, well, let's see if we can do without that role till next year. And to me, that's more of a messing around with the budget, right? Not having the cost of hire this year. But we are seeing a lot of roles going on hold, not just in one region, but everywhere. We're seeing roles go on hold till the new year. We're going to play it out. We're going to go with the people that we've got at the moment. And in my mind, that just puts extra pressure on the teams that they have got, right? When you don't have the right number of people for the level of business that you've got. Mark, you shook your head.
Yeah, I'm again with Craig on this. It's about optics. We must understand businesses have come out of COVID. They have never had to adopt their business model so quickly to stay alive, and some have even thrived during COVID. They've come out of COVID, and I think everybody's still trying to find their perfect sales rhythm, their perfect process of actually getting their business going to how they dream about it going and where it needs to be going from a practical perspective. So there's a lot of role tweaking. Do I really need that person? Because we didn't really need all those people during COVID. Do we just bring on hordes of extra people, or do we rather take it go slow? And it is a learning curve, I think, for businesses. Every quarter, they're reassessing in terms of what revenues they generated. Do we really need those people? Don't we need those people? And I think it's going to be like that for the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be that yo-yo effect. I don't think it's got anything to do with the recession. I just think it's businesses finding their rhythm again. We must understand this about people. It's not that necessary that a person is not able to do their job anymore. The change in their job role and function sometimes has outgrown the person because of the pandemic. You may not need all those support people anymore. Half the team is working remotely. You may need more of those people. So it's not that the people are unable to do their job. Maybe they're not required anymore. They simply can't fit into the new change of the role that they need to deliver on. So there's a lot of moving and shaking, lots of different parts. So again, I don't think it has anything to do with the recession. I think this is just the outflow from what's happened with COVID, is everybody's trying to find their new business sales rhythm, if you will.
Anybody have anything to say to that?
Suki, if I could add to that too, because I think we've seen a lot happening in the tech sector right now too, with a lot of layoffs that are happening both in the US and in Canada. And I think to Mark's point, some of these organizations were maybe too big to support the business that they're doing. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a tweet this morning from Jack Dorsey about Twitter, almost apologizing to Twitter for not being responsible about downsizing the workforce to match the revenue and what was needed for the company. So I think you have some of that happening too, where now we are out of the pandemic and you have companies looking at that overall organization and saying, is this right? Do we need to right size? Do we have the right people in the right seats? And is this the most effective business model to keep moving forward?
I agree, Janelle. I think I saw that Dorsey tweet, and reminds Warren Buffett. I love one of these lines he's always used: "Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful." And you've seen so many of these organizations, particularly in the tech space, that just grew, and it didn't match the revenue that was coming in, so it was inevitable. And then coming back to your point, I mean, so you keep organizations putting things on hold or slowing down. Be greedy when others are fearful. And I think this is an opportunity as recruitment leaders or as agencies to have a look around and think you can really upskill your team. You can really get some phenomenal talent that's going to be on the marketplace. We're seeing a lot of internal recruiters being let go. And if you have the courage to invest in your team today, I think, as Mark refers to it as the yo-yo, when we come out of this cycle, and we will, you can be in a position to take a lot of market share.
I think there's also another part of this is I get everything you guys said. I agree. But looking at it from the employee's perspective, they've got a leadership team who are one day hiring this role, now they're putting on hold. Then they're hiring this role, then that's gone on hold, right? So I think Craig, it was yourself that said about optics, right? I think there's also this danger is, okay, whilst you're trying to find your new sales rhythm, as you said, Mark, the message it sends to the people. So that comes back to communication. So I guess what we're saying is if you are in that, for lack of a better word, yo-yo place, optics, you've got to communicate that, because I know people that are looking, they're reaching out to us saying, oh my God, is my company going to survive? Is this happening? Because they were looking to hire this role, now they're not hiring it. And then by the same token, and I know we're going off base here, but I'm talking to, and I'm only speaking for our industry here, where one branch manager has left. The branch manager next door now suddenly has inherited this branch man, is now doing twice the work for the same amount of money, right? So I think going into 2023, if that is going to be your strategy, it's got to get communicated a lot better. Because if you are just putting roles on hold, especially senior roles, and you're not communicating it, what you're doing is you're creating this sense of fear in the team that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Would you agree?
Suki, there's 3 C's to success. I come from South Africa, I don't spell well, so there must be 3 C's in there somewhere. It's clarity and constant communication. And even if the communication is not all positive, at least people know where they stand. The key is transparency, letting everybody know where they stand, getting the freedom to ask any questions they want with impunity, that they're not going to be browbeaten for asking something that's controversial. Because as soon as you open that communication pipe and everybody understands the message top to bottom, left to right, and everybody's on the same speedboat, because I don't do buses, on the same speedboat, it makes things so much easier, because people know what bumpy ride they're in for. So you either got to strap yourself in and hold on, or you're going to jump off and you want to jump on another bus. It's those leaders who are, and I have the term armchair generals, who sit in the ivory towers, who are not prepared to communicate, roll up their sleeves, and share what's really going on and where we're going. Because what's going on is one thing, but where we're going and how we're going to get there is just as important. And there's the disparity. So you see people jumping ship quickly because they have no idea where they're going. And the communication is just kept at that sort of boardroom level. I mean, that's not the way to drive a business forward. If ever, that needs to change now.
I remember, Craig, on the last panel, you were saying you communicate, and then you communicate it again, and then again, right? So let's move on. So Travis, have a question for you. How are you addressing the talent shortage in the market overall, internally and externally, with your team? How are you setting up your teams to be effective in this environment that seems like it will be our new norm for years to come?
Right. Okay. So first off, I guess on the internal, we're not pausing. Like we're still absolutely going to go forward. Sure, the market's changed. But we have three main channels, I guess, internally. So first would be internal recruitment. We have a phenomenal, I'd like to say, the best internal recruitment function in Canada. I think a lot of agencies tend to take the tact of like, well, we'll put an average performer or maybe an underperformer on our internal recruitment because we don't want to jeopardize our business, our billing business. And we take the exact opposite. Like, what is more important to your business? So we put our best people to recruit our best people. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. So internal recruitment is big. Internal transfers is a huge one for us, Suki, as you know. Canada is a phenomenal place to live. I think everybody would agree with that. And at Hayes, you can transfer anywhere in the world, to any one of our 33 countries, expenses paid once you've done 2 years in your base. So if I walk outside my door right now, it's like the bloody United Nations. We have transfers from Ireland, England, Poland, Spain, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, New Zealand. Anyways, I could keep going. So we do a lot of that internal collaboration and sharing talent internationally. And then lastly, I think fortunate for everybody on this call, people use external or third-party recruiters. And I use this lady named Suki. She's okay. She placed me here about 12 years ago, so she's obviously not perfect. But everybody makes mistakes, and I always find it's how you respond from a mistake that's like most important. So we'll keep using her for a little bit at least. But yeah, so that would be, I guess that would be our internal strategy. On the external side, same thing. Stick with Mark. We'll kind of do the rule of threes. We've got phenomenal training. I think we're lucky with our customer base, and then thirdly, kind of our marketing piece. So internally, there is a skill shortage in Canada. Absolutely, right? Like, I don't think anybody could disagree with that. But I do believe that it is exacerbated greatly by bias in the hiring community, unconscious or otherwise. And there's a plethora of talent being skipped over in Canada in under-recruited communities for not having Canadian experience. And I think 99 times out of 100, that's completely nonsense. So we have 4 full-time internal trainers who, amongst other things, train our staff on removing any bias from the recruitment process. That's from job adverts down to interviewing and analysis. I mean, there's data out there, horrible data, that talk about how women are less likely to apply to a job if they're not a 100% fit. So like, look at your job postings. Do you really need a bachelor degree? I mean, 50% of Canada doesn't have a bachelor degree. I'm not in a position to turn away half of the market. So making sure that your job adverts are good, the channels you're using, are they getting out? Are they visible and accessible to all communities? Like that's a huge part. And that ties pretty closely to our customer base. We will not work with any customers who do not share our values in the aforementioned, 100%. So we break up with customers, maybe not monthly, but certainly many times through a year if they don't share our values. And we're very lucky to have a talented lady named Louisa Benedicto, who's our SVP of DEI. And we do recognize not everybody's the same place on the journey as we are, and we've still got a lot to grow. But Louisa spends a fair bit of time advising, consulting, training hiring managers and our customers on inclusive recruitment to make sure that everybody gets a fair opportunity and a fair chance to get that job. So that would be maybe number 2. We're pretty particular about curating our customer base. And then lastly, and certainly not least, is our marketing team. And you can have the best job advert in the world, and you can have the most inclusive best customer, but there just aren't enough people out there. So if you can't get your posting or your opportunity out to all communities in a way that everybody can apply, you're not going to be able to fill the jobs. So our marketing team, I think, is the best in the business. And I'm pretty biased. All of our stuff is the best, isn't it? Maybe someone will disagree here, so I'll do a handoff. But I think that's it for me. It's training, it's marketing, and it's having a customer base that is a true partner.
Who's going to disagree with him?
I dare you.
Come on.
I'm sure Hayes is wonderful. It's an interesting talent market. I use the word interesting on purpose, right? It's coming out of the pandemic. It's been all over the place. The shuffling of talent, people changing their opinions on what's important to them. Their values have shifted, so they don't want to do work they've done before. So in terms of sort of working with clients and employers throughout the country, we spend a lot of time speaking to them about outcomes, right? So not only the bias when it comes to diversity and inclusion, but bias when it comes to, I've hired it before, so I'm going to hire it again. And having them sort of, speak to us more around the outcomes they're looking for in the role that they have open, or the outcomes of the team or the department, and what they're trying to achieve as a group, and kind of let's find the talent that can do that, or let's help you, redefine maybe what your team design should be to be able to find the talent or the skills that can achieve the outcomes you're looking for, instead of hiring the same role just because we've had this role for 15 years. So we spend a lot of time sort of in the external market, sort of working with clients on what are you really looking for? What are you trying to achieve? What better outcomes are you trying to create? And spending a lot of time that way. And then internally, just to piggyback a bit on what Travis said, we spent a lot of time this year, 18 months for post-pandemic, in the pandemic, getting ready for post-pandemic, on our internal learning and development programs too, our new LMS systems in place and well used by our colleagues across the country, and opportunity. So we internal promotions, and I think 10 role changes, sort of lateral move, more subject matter expert changes internally too. So we've really had an emphasis on, our internal talent and how can you give them learning opportunities to do different things with us as well. So that's helped us sort of, retain our talented colleagues to do great things for our clients and candidates.
Janelle?
Suki? Yeah, if I could just add something. Craig, you said something that resonated with me about people don't necessarily always want to do the same work they've always done. And so I think there's also an element of reskilling and upskilling our talent, whether it's internal or external candidates and associates, finding ways to give them new skills. So one of the successful things we were able to put in place was a program that actually took people with no call center experience and put them through a course that would allow them to then be hired into a call center role, which was remote. So for people that were working face-to-face on a production floor that wanted to change or needed to change to something that had more flexibility, now had the skills to be able to do that. And I think as recruitment leaders, we have an obligation to be able to help our candidates and our associates learn those new skills and get them ready for the types of jobs that they want to have, whether it's a shift in skill set, whether it's a shift in career, and really being able to support them in that way.
Can I just say one or two things, Suki, if you don't mind? I want to tell you the three of you are absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, I'm proud to be in an industry with the likes of three of you as leaders. To me, it's all about that culture of learning. And if you don't have that culture of learning, giving everybody an opportunity to learn new skills, to move across the organization and really learn on the job as opposed to just the theoretical part, is so exciting to hear. So thank you for that. And you're right. We need to engage the clients a lot more, that they start to understand what they hired 10 years ago and what they hired 5 years ago simply doesn't exist anymore. We've got to look everywhere. Travis, I remember when I was looking to work in Canada, I was told I have no Canadian experience. I should have approached Suki. Maybe she would have got me a job. And you're right, these people about having a degree and so on, maybe I'm different. I come from a blue-collar family, from a small mining town in the middle of nowhere. How I got through high school is a miracle, but there's a whole story behind that. So I had no degree and fell into this industry by accident, and then obviously did some learning after that. But we've got to educate the clients. And if ever there was an opportunity for us as an industry to stand our ground and truly become a lot more consultative as opposed to transactional, what I mean by that is just chasing turnover as opposed to really real good bottom line profits. Turnover without profit is like eating soup with a fork. Lots of work and nothing to show for it. So, if the game plan is to just chase massive turnover and don't have such a big profit at the bottom, at the end of the day, that's each company's prerogative. But then we wonder why we have to find candidates that don't exist when we're under massive pressure, even now, even more so, to lessen the margins, to charge less, but everybody wants more. And when one or two key players allow that to continue, the rest of us have a very few options. We either go that way or have to go and find more business. And it's very difficult. I think this is an opportunity for us as organizations to stand our ground and sort of fight back and say, you know what, we're consultative here. We want to get better margins from you because you want us to find the impossible. But we cannot just capitulate to these cheap margins because it's a lot of work for nothing. So I probably got a little bit off tangent there, but just wanted to throw that in the mix anyway.
I think, Mark, you make a fair point because, and Travis, I love what you said about let the clients go, right? And literally, I've been away, 2.5, 3 weeks, came into the office this morning. I made a decision to have a conversation with a client along exactly those lines, right? So we got to be willing to let the clients go. Doesn't make them a bad client, just a bad fit for your business. But I can't help but thinking there's the learning part of this, right? There's so many managers out there or leaders out there that still are just looking at, have you made X number of outbound dials? Have you done this? How many meetings have you done? How many of these have you done? And we've lost the art of actual selling. So I'm seeing, certainly when we're talking to candidates, that it's so transactional, not because they want to be transactional, but they've got this number to hit. They've got to sign, I don't know, I'm just making this up, 10 new terms of business this month. So whichever client is saying yes, that hits that target. So that's also driving the revenue down. Because when you are selling on price, if you have no differentiator from your competitor, the only differentiator you have is price. So if somebody over here is giving me service for, I don't know, 20%, and you're the same, well, can you do 15? And that's driving the prices down. So I think as leaders going into 2023, one of the things we have to look at is what pressure are we putting on our teams to just grab business? Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to look at that. I quite like, Mark, I always take something from you, buddy. And turnover without profit is like eating soup with a fork. That one might be said by me a few times to come, but it's the same thing, Sugi. If you're just chasing to sign a term of business, if you're signing 10 a month, like, you're not working with a high quality customer. You're certainly not in a partnership. And I think a true measure of an individual's success should be like the retention and expansion of a relationship or of a customer. Because if you're providing value, if you're providing insights, that's all the sales that you need to do. The partnerships will come off the back of that. So chasing numbers, fair enough. I mean, there's a certain aspect of it you have to decide if someone is working hard. But the value of a salesperson's success to me comes in the quality of the relationships that they hold.
Yeah, because what you end up doing is when you're signing these terms, because let's be honest, companies have wised up. They'll put this non-solicitation clause in there. So they've stopped you from headhunting their people out, yet you're not actually making money out of them. So I think as leaders, that's something everybody's got to look at, right? Before we move on, does anybody have anything else to add to this? Janelle, Craig?
Well, I just think part of that client conversation that we're speaking to right now too is that battle we have as staffing companies to navigate procurement and line managers and HR as well, right? That's really been the challenge. And I've been on many other panels too, where you've got sort of HR leaders in the room with procurement leaders, and they often don't agree on the outcomes they're looking for, right? So again, part of it is we do it to ourselves, to Mark's point, especially light industrial the last 20 years, right? The segment of our industry that is requires the most amount of work to make sure the talent is taken care of and doing great things and being able to work in the markets, but often a race to the bottom penny there too. So it's that whole concept of sort of client selection is important because, again, the most important piece in all of our puzzles is typically that candidate side. And if you work with clients that candidates want to work for, you can really build your candidate communities, and they're always the decision maker in any placement that we make as staffing organizations too. So there's a lot in this. We could go on for a lot of time, but just sort of that, to me, that one of the things that we're working on is that procurement talent dynamic, and trying to help procurement see it more from a talent and outcome and the soup analogy that Mark used instead of just looking at the bottom line only.
Good luck.
And
Janelle, anything to add?
Just quickly, I think it all boils down to level setting the expectations with the client, right? So whether that's on the type of candidates they're looking for, on the type of relationship and the way that you're going to work with them, alignment of values, to Travis's point, I think it's all about making sure that those expectations are clear. Because I think if you don't have those types of conversations up front, to Mark's point about being consultative, you're not going to have the match, right? There's going to be things that fall apart down the line if you're not aligned from the very beginning. And if you don't have those conversations along the way to make sure that your expectations are still aligned. So I think, when you talk about growing a client like Travis did and kind of that retention aspect, is you've got to communicate. You've got to be having those conversations with your client to make sure that you're still both moving in the same direction.
I think there's also, just to add on to that, we've got to give our teams permission to say, no, we're not taking this client. Right? I think we have to put that in their hand and let them walk away, because they're the ones that are going to deliver. I always say we have 2 clients, only one pays us. And we tend to forget that our other client, the one that's not paying, is the candidate. Right? So empower the teams, your front line, to say, okay, we're not working with this client, walk away. Even if that means they don't hit a target. Sorry, go on.
Anyone who works with me understands I have a saying that goes, rather work on no business than bad business, because you've got opportunity to go and get good business. This point is to try and, I'm going to say another, I've got many sayings. The other was never confuse motion with progress. We all look so busy working on crap, and then you wonder why we're not getting the results. And coming back to Travis's point, as leaders, we've got to engage our people and teach them the 2 Qs. It's quality and quantity. You've got to churn out a lot of work to find the quality. It just doesn't come to you easily. But at the same time, make sure you cut people loose that are not playing the game, because there is business out there. You've got to work at it, and it will come.
I think that's a really important part, Mark. And I think Suki, where you said, I forget exactly the way you phrased it, but essentially give your employees the confidence to say no. I would say it's equally important, if not more, to have that trusting relationship that it's okay to admit you were wrong, or you have failed and it didn't work. And so often you see people like you're talking about, Mark. You've had that rec for 90 days. You've sent 25 resumes. Like, what are you doing? It's okay to say you've made a mistake, and it's okay to just let that go. And if you don't have that relationship with your team or with your manager, there's trouble brewing.
Totally. So, okay. So, Craig, next question comes to you. You've made several successful acquisitions in the first few months following the pandemic lockdown here in Canada. What are your thoughts on taking such economic risks in the current environment, and why did you choose to take them when you did?
Well, we did 2 acquisitions in 4 months. I don't think I'd recommend that to anybody. But if I had hair, I would no longer have it. So I'm kind of built for this kind of thing. But 4 in 2 months, and our teams on all sides have done a great job of bringing everything together and getting everybody integrated. And it really wasn't a why for us. So they're both completely aligned with our growth strategy. So one being accelerating our technology and engineering footprints, and the other one was sort of that the supporting talent, diversity, and inclusion. So they were kind of no-brainers from a why standpoint, which meant, no matter the economic uncertainty that might be out there, we would have gone forward with both of these. The first one was in Alberta, in Bowen, and kind of full circle for me. So when I started in staffing back in 2000, it was in Calgary, and we put a competitor up on the board that we wanted to compete against and beat, and that competitor was Bowen. So 22 years later, I come full circle working with Shannon and her team. They built a wonderful company for 47 years, and bringing them into the Agilus family was kind of full circle and a lot of fun for us. And the cool part about Bowen piece for us on the why was, number one, it really solidifies our leading position in the engineering segment in Canada. So that was, number one there. They also had a few different solutions in the engineering technical space that we didn't have that were good for our customers. But they also also have this, we're also now, through the Bowen acquisition, a joint venture partner, 49% ownership in StreamSource. And StreamSource is an Indigenous staffing company. And so, it's been great learning for us to partner with this organization that is tasked with building careers for Indigenous talent. And also giving back to First Nations communities. So this Alberta-based company, StreamSource, does some really great things in the market, the community, and we've been able to, now we're a partner with them and looking to expand that across the country. So those are two kind of really things with Bowen. The other acquisition we did was Delivery Group. The Delivery Group is a technology staffing and solutions company in Toronto. And that one was really expanding our solutions portfolio. So their talented team joining our talented IT staffing team, coming together with a bit more of a solutions view to things, more on the professional services, advisory, talent-based SOW work. So kind of increasing the breadth of our portfolio was sort of our main driver of the Delivery Group. Also some great talented individuals coming into our team with our talented group. So that one again was more of a, doubling our technology footprint in Canada, adding a solution suite that we did not have, which just makes it easier to work with customers across the country. So both of those kind of a no-brainer for us in coming together. So, regardless of what the economy is doing or was doing or might do, both of these we would have gone forward with, both from a margin, from a solution, from a talent perspective, all great things. So, great companies, adding more great talent to our talented team and all coming into Agilus. It's been busy, to say the very least, but very, very great for our future.
Are there more acquisitions coming up? Is that planned? No?
Come on, tell us who you want to buy. Travis, take notes. Who are you wanting to buy?
Sounds weird. No, we've just integrated fully the Delivery Group in the summer, and looking forward to just doing great things for clients, candidates, and our colleagues internally for a little while before we look at that again.
So your strategy for 2023 isn't necessarily acquisitions?
It is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I was thinking to Travis's point earlier on about the whole movement of people internally. How has that gone for you? I know the acquisition's done,
yeah,
but you were doing the acquisition at the kind of like tail end of the pandemic. Now we've got the supposed recession coming in. Has that had any impact on the teams of people you brought into the business with the acquisitions, duplicate roles and things like that?
There are a few duplicate roles, but again, we got a lot bigger through these acquisitions too. So we had a need for everybody to stay. One of the benefits of this too, when you think about sort of, I think strategy, you start with strategy and then you work on structure. Adding these two great companies to our already great company has allowed us to kind of reinvent the structure, which actually allowed us to take some of the leaders from both of the acquisitions and put them into leadership roles internally at Agilus. And also have opportunity for some of those talented colleagues that have come into the company to actually get promoted into roles, not only in maybe the skill set they were in. So we've had colleagues move from our engineering teams to our technology teams, from our professional staffing teams to engineering teams. So there's been a lot of good migration internally this year, which was really facilitated by the fact that we brought our three companies together. So it's been a net positive from a talent perspective for us.
Interesting. And just talking of acquisitions, is that something, Janelle, Travis, Mark, you guys see on the horizon for your businesses next year, or is that not even on?
We are not a very acquisitive company by nature. Tend to do things as much as we can organically. But I think to answer your question, whenever these cycles, these yo-yos happen, there will be a fair bit of M&A activity over the next 18 months in our space as a whole. I think with the cost of cash going up, a lot of organizations are maybe funding large temp communities with lines of credit. It's going to get a lot tighter. I think you're going to have a lot of organizations who maybe aren't able to pay the bills as quickly as they could. And there'll be a lot of investments from some of the bigger players probably coming into it. So although it's not really part of our strategy, we look at things from time to time. If I was a smaller boutique owner, I would be anticipating a lot of M&A activity over the next 18 months.
Janelle, what about yourself?
We don't have anything on the horizon for 23 either. Globally, we just did a fairly large acquisition of Aka and merged that with our Modus brand. And that's still in integration right now. So nothing on the horizon for 2023, but similar to what Travis said, I think that there is going to be a lot of activity happening. And I think it also comes back to the point too of really making sure when these times of whether we have a recession happen or not, I think all of us as staffing leaders have to look at being fiscally responsible for our business, right? And looking at ways that if we're in a position to grow and expand solutions the same way that Craig did, then maybe this is the time to take advantage of that, because I do think there's going to be a lot of activity happening, to Travis's point, in the next 12 to 18 months.
And Mark, because you do quite a fair bit just in your career with mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, I've done a lot before, but Drake, I guess, similar to Hayes, is the old man, as I affectionately call our chairman, doesn't really have an appetite for doing acquisitions. He prefers to start typical entrepreneur flair, where he'll just say, listen, I'm planting a flag in Thailand, go and open the office. And like, okay, you're flying tomorrow. So that's the type of environment we work on. If he sees an opportunity, we'll rather grassroot it. But yes, I do think there'll be a lot of M&A opportunities coming down the track, but I would also caution people going to do M&As during a time of uncertainty, which people claim with this recession coming down the wire, is there's going to be lots of bags of nails and bricks out there that you're going to buy. So the due diligence has to be really, really robust. And yes, it's nice to have a wonderful culture fit and they're wonderful people, but what are you really buying? Are you buying a dead business or business that is cash strapped and has got no money? Craig's obviously bought a good bunch of companies, because I have a saying that goes, you can always find a job for great people. So there's a perfect example. He's obviously did the due diligence there. The acquisitions that he's embarked on are the right fit, and he's kept the people. Always a great sign. But is that the case going forward? I think there's going to be respect for a lot more businesses that are badly broken than those are just a little bit bruised that you could probably prop up and fix. It's going to be a tricky one.
I think also there's going to be an element of those people that do have the cash, those companies and private equity and all the rest of it, trying to bring down the price of those people that are I use the word loosely, desperate, right? Those smaller boutiques that are in a difficult situation. And when somebody comes along and says, hey, I'll give you X, and it's almost a relief, they see light at the end of the tunnel. So what I would caution is those individuals watching, and they maybe are in that position, getting acquired might not be the right thing for you. There may be other ways of you to continue doing business. Now, if you were going to sell anyhow, that was part of your strategy, that's a different story. Because one of the things we've had a lot of in the last 6 months is companies approaching us saying, we want to acquire. Right. So there's definitely this appetite, and I don't know what's driving that, to buy more companies. I just worry that there's going to be those smaller companies that get taken advantage of. And I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing. That's not what I'm saying, but just taking advantage of those individuals that maybe have got cash flow problems at the moment.
Suki, but just bear in mind that in a time of adversity that's apparently coming down the track, if there is a small niche, one or two agencies that is impacting a larger organization's ability to take that market share for whatever reason, sometimes the strategy is one is you buy them and you shut them down, because then they're out of the picture. So I would say to anybody who's a little bit keen on selling now and thinks the opportunity is probably go the route that Craig has done with one of the other organizations is and I understand it's with the indigenous route that you follow, but just sort of high level, is possibly getting to bed with them from a JV point of view, because you can see, is there genuine strategic intent to help us grow? Is the fit right? And so first step JV with a potential buyout X amount of time, as opposed to getting locked in with golden handcuffs with something that they're going to put you out of business in a year or two, because that is the strategic intent behind the scenes. We must remember, all M&As are not all friendly and pretty. There's a lot of ruthless stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So for any folks out there which are smaller businesses and are looking at selling, just keep your eyes wide open. because sometimes it's better to just stay the course as opposed to implode.
Definitely. Anybody else have anything to add to that before I move on?
Just a quick note, maybe to close it off, is private equity is still looking for investment in the staffing industry as well, which is a good sign for the industry, I think. And I think you look at the big publicly traded competitors in the world, Janelle, their stock prices are holding, if not gaining, after the dip about 6 months ago. So I think investors as a whole are bullish on the industry, which fares well for those that are looking to sell or buy potentially. So that's good for us as an industry, I think.
100%. Okay, so Mark, from your perspective, are you seeing differences in market to market in how they're reacting to this working model and the possible incoming recession?
When you say working model, what do you mean by working model?
Working from home, hybrid.
You didn't pre-wire me with.
Sorry?
You've ambushed me with the question you didn't pre-wire me with. No, I'm only kidding. So just repeat the question again, please.
Okay, so from your perspective, are you seeing differences market to market in how companies are reacting to the different working hybrid, work from home, 100% office model, and different reactions to the possible incoming recession?
I think there's a few things, both in seeing in our industry and as well as dealing with the different clients across the different countries we deal in. To put it in simple terms, there is massive confusion because nobody knows what the right answer is yet. So there's a lot of experimenting going on. Part hybrid, haul them all into the office, give them a straight instruction. They have to come in, give them lots of TLC, let them get on with it. We don't care. Just show up when you show up. So it's a very up and down model. So there is no right one fits all. It's massive confusion right now. As everybody, as I said earlier in our convo, is trying to find the right sales rhythm. And it's not just for a company holistically. It's then per country, per service line or business unit. It is right down to the granular department level. Is it finance and admin to the sales engine? It's so complicated now. There is not a simple answer. And the clients are just as confused because they're not quite sure what's working for them either. So part of our recruitment process with becoming more difficult with the clients is because you're working on a job order, for example. Today it's a hybrid model. Tomorrow they've decided it's in the office, and the next day they say they can work from home. So it's massive confusion, Suki. So I don't have the answer. And we're just really living it from day to day because it's changing from day to day. In different countries, different regions, as I said, different departments, etc.
I think what I'm seeing, and this is just from the staffing industry, I'm seeing the smaller players or relatively smaller players are still very hungry and they're still seeing the cup as half full. Whereas I'm seeing some of the larger companies just saying, whoa, the brakes are completely going on, right? So, and definitely I'm seeing the US is still really pushing forward. And maybe it's just the markets within the US that I work. When I was in London last week, in the UK last week, and I was meeting up with clients and candidates there was still this hunger there. There was still this growth mindset despite the recession, despite the fears that are coming up. So that are just some of the observations I've seen in our sector, in our industry.
But Suki, if we look at outside of our sector, right,
Yep.
the larger corporations, tying into what Janelle said earlier, have realized most of them, and Twitter, for example, were massively overstaffed and chasing big turnover. I mean, I think the number, and I had to double check that on the weekend, was, but I know my son was telling me, and he's doing business studies at school, and saying, Dad, you know that Twitter loses 3 million a day? I said, no, I can't believe that. But you don't think it's very possible. I mean, 3 million a day? I mean, I just doesn't equate in this little brain of mine. So clearly you were overstaffed, and Elon Musk is probably doing the right thing. That's a debate for another day. So larger corporations have really been those dinosaurs that have just been marching on, hoovering up all this turnover with little real profit. And it's sort of those mid-sized businesses who've always had had to be lean and mean, watching costs, making sure we get ultimate productivity out of each team member, collaboration, multitasking, all that thing, drive, are accelerating out of the recession, I beg your pardon, out of COVID at a much more rapid pace, and a lot more agile and lean and mean to navigate this pending recession than these big dinosaurs, which I think they are the ones that are panicking and instilling the fear with the dreaded R word that's now trickling down. Thank you to social media, etc., etc.
Yeah, actually, I think you make a fair point there. Craig, what are your thoughts?
On the recession piece, Suki, or?
Yeah, and just generally to what Mark said, what I said.
Yeah, well, I think yes. So I think it's uncertain is probably the right word. So as soon as the uncertain word is out there, some companies freeze, pause, hedge their bet, and some companies take advantage and grow, similar to our earlier comments. I think what's interesting me in this uncertainty is sort of that the supply and demand piece, because demand for talent's still there. In Canada for sure, and in the US for sure. If things slow down, I'm interested in, I've been talking a lot about supply and demand versus willing to supply and demand, and that willing to supply on the talent side, because there's been that shift in work that wants to be done, or values and work-life balance and all of those things. So what I'm interested, how does the supply side of the talent shift over the next 6, 9, 12 months? Because I think that'll be very, very interesting. So will we see more talent coming back to roles they used to do? I don't know. I think it's more of a question for me at this point. I think I'm bullish on technology. I'm bullish on engineering skill sets, no matter what happens through the next 12 months. Those light industrial and sort of professional ones, a little bit maybe more uncertainty, maybe still need the talent, but a longer time to fill, because we can pause or wait, or be choosier potentially about the talent we bring into the company. So I think it'll be interesting. We're approaching it as there might be a slight slowdown especially in perm, because that's usually what slows down first. I think we all agree on that. But we think contract will be high because the work still needs to get done. That's kind of our view at this point.
Fair point. Janelle, what about yourself?
I don't think we've, when you said the work that still needs to be done, I don't think we've caught up yet, right? That supply and demand is still so out of whack, and there's not enough candidates, and the jobs are still there. So I think until that starts to move a different direction, we're gonna be in the same situation. So I'm also, I think there is a lot of uncertainty, but like you, Craig, I really am curious to see how that is going to play out in terms of the actual job demand and the candidate side. Wish I had a crystal ball.
Yeah, I think Travis made a really fair point earlier on about that we have talent here. Now I'm speaking for Canada here. We have talent here. We just aren't giving them a chance, and I'm talking about new immigrants, right? I think just Canada alone, we're in such a strong position. If only we would open our eyes to that talent a lot more than we already are, because they can do some of these jobs that have been open for a while. We see it all the time. Yeah, great candidate, but no Canadian experience, right? Great candidate, but we're not going to pay much. And then, of course, these are not the words, right? The expectation is, well, okay, well, if I'm taking somebody without Canadian experience, therefore I should be able to get them cheaper. I think all of that is just short-sighted of leaders in business, period, to think that we shouldn't be looking at that pool of candidates. Canada is in a good position if we look at that pool of talent there. Travis, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, certainly agree on the talent standpoint. But if you're on the call today, if you're a recruiter, if you're an account manager, whatever you are, I would just say nobody knows what's coming. But you know what you can do today. And one step at a time, have a good 11 to 12 hour, have a good afternoon, then have a good Tuesday. Because the other major factor that we have here is inflation. And in this industry, we don't need a really low record unemployment to do well. And it's really troubling. I was at the grocery store on the weekend. It was my son's 6th birthday, and I was sent to go get some fruit. I can't believe the bloody cost. It was like $10 for a watermelon. And I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to still get that watermelon, but not a lot of families are. And my kids are at home today because there's some really underpaid people within the school system right now. And we're going to have a lot of people jumping left and right for $5, $10 more an hour, or $2,000 more per year just to keep up with what's happening around us. So I think in our sector, I don't have a lot of fear about the next 12 months, but I do have a lot of fear for those who might not be as privileged.
Well, when I was in the UK last week and I was talking to friends, family, clients, everybody, the price of just heating your house, your utilities, I was shocked by how much it had gone up. It had gone up a couple of dollars. I was hearing 50, 60, 70 pounds a month. Now that's, now, I mean, that's crazy. That's just, yeah. And then before you talk about the cost of food, I mean, Mark, you'll know better than I on this one. But I think there is genuinely a real issue going to happen for your minimum wage people, because they're not going to be able to afford to live. And that's going to become our problem as a staffing industry, because unless companies wait, and I'm just using England as an example, same applies everywhere. If we're not educating the company that you cannot get somebody for minimum wage, that they've got to increase that, we're just creating problems. We're taking on roles that we can't cover. And I think there's going to be a genuine problem for some, especially in the UK, individuals that can't afford to live.
Yeah, but Suki, there's another angle to this. It is a hell of a dilemma. You've got people that don't want to work for minimum wage, with respect, would rather sit home and draw benefits. And that's everywhere in the world. I'm not picking on the UK. And then we've got immigrants, because I'm an immigrant too, and who are now in the country. They are prepared to work for minimum wage, but the client won't give them the opportunity. So, I mean, it's just, come on, there's such a disconnect. We've all got to pull together. And you know what it's about? If you don't want to work, you don't want to work. There's nothing we can do to get you to work. But there are people who want to work, so give them a chance. And therein lies the problem. And it drives me insane when you want, especially entry level, or there are some on the blue collar level, is, oh, well, they don't have enough experience, or they're not Canadian. I mean, or they're not British. I mean, we have the same here. And I keep on saying, listen, you want to get rid of the immigrants here in the UK. Who's going to do your Uber meals that drops? Who's going to do your Amazon deliveries? I mean, who's at Burger King? Who's out there working in the Tesco's and the big shopping malls? It's mostly the immigrants. And with respect, it's not the English kids, and it's not many English people, because they want a different type of path to follow. And that's the same dilemma we have everywhere in the world. Got lots of business to fill, but the clients want to cherry pick people that don't exist anymore. It's madness. If everybody was working, we wouldn't have an issue. Dream status. I'll pass back to you before I get
But you're right.
my soapbox.
I've been in 5 hotels in the last 2.5 weeks, and every person at the hotel chambermaid, none of them were locals, right? They were immigrants. We had this fantastic conversation with the Uber driver that drove us to one of the airports, right? And he was talking about what he was from Eastern Europe, and it was the Vegas leg. He was talking about what he's doing to upskill himself, right? And the books he's reading, it was amazing to listen to that, and how he was balancing his learning with work. The drive is there, the appetite is there, the workers are there. We've just got to, like I said, 5 hotels, and every chambermaid, not a single chambermaid was local. To your point, because we don't want to do it.
Just final comment on this, and I don't want it to reflect that it's all, let's call it the sort of blue collar retail type roles. I mean, we picked up a bunch of senior pharmaceutical biotech roles, where they asked us to find those infamous underwater pop-up toaster technicians that don't exist, or purple squirrels, call them what you will. And we found a bunch of them, but they weren't British and they weren't sitting here. The company's answer was simply this: oh, well, they're not English, so we can't employ them. But they don't, there's nobody like that in England. They're sitting in a certain other country. They're prepared to pay their own visa. They've got all the experience. They can speak English, happy to relocate. No. And you think to yourself, seriously, do you really want your company to grow and fill those positions? This is the problem. There is such a myopic view on actually making the businesses grow. And I think what's happening now is they're too afraid to make those bold decisions. So now we use the recession as the excuse. I don't get it. I don't get
Fair
it.
point. Fair point. I've got a question. How much recession affect the downsizing of companies? Not quite clear on what that question means. I think what she's trying to ask is the downsizing that companies are doing at the moment, is it really due to the recession? I think that's what she's trying to what that question is.
I saw the lady was in HR. The first people they let go is HR. I'm only joking. So I'm not quite sure what the question is either, but
I think pretty much putting it in layman's terms is, are people using the looming recession as an excuse to downsize? I think the general consensus from the panel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, no, people are just right sizing themselves at the moment, and it's not necessarily because of the recession. Is that pretty much what we're saying?
I think it goes back to what Mark said earlier about some organizations that are already lean and mean, that operate in that way, are thriving, right? And the ones that are not are trying to get there.
Yeah.
Recession or not.
Okay. So someone else is writing, has this been recorded? Yes, it has been recorded, and I will send it out in the next couple of days. So that'll come out to you. I'm just looking through. Actually, this is one that I wanted to put up much earlier. I worked at an agency years ago where we had 25% retainer. Anyone signing anything below that took it out of their part of the commissions. The agency share never dropped. Anything below 22% and you got dismissed. Wow. I personally wouldn't recommend anybody does that, but can anybody see a valid reason for having that type of model?
I mean, don't agree with it, but I can certainly, a lot of the executive placement firms, or think about a brand like Louis Vuitton, like it's important that they keep their level. And if Louis Vuitton starts getting sold at Winners, that's probably going to be a challenge for that brand, although my wife would be pleased about it. So I do see some value, in maintaining your price point, but I think only looking at one data point is like kind of silly. If you can fill a job within 24 hours at 15%, and your colleague next to you takes 3 weeks of work to fill a job at 20%, like who's getting a better return on investment for their time spent? So looking at the fee structure might be okay to protect your brand, but there's so many other factors related to it. I think that's quite a silly short-term view.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't think, maybe being that black and white works for whatever organization that is. I think we worked really hard with our teams the last 18 months on pricing discipline and supply and demand and return for your time and value of talent, to have better conversations around, fees or pricing. But yeah, it's it really depends, to Travis's point, it's the opportunity for us, not the placement. So, we really view it that way.
Yeah, and I think it's like, give your teams permission to walk away, right? So if you're so hard and fast on that the fee must be X, there's potential of picking up a client that's not aligned. So it goes back to giving your teams permission to walk away from business, even if it's at 25%. Okay, I want to wrap up because we've ran over. I really appreciate you guys taking time out today. Janelle, any final thoughts, comments?
This has been fantastic, Suki. I think we touched on so many different pieces of what's happening right now in the economy, what's happening in Canada, what we've kind of seen coming out of the pandemic. So as always, it's been a pleasure being with Travis and Craig and Mark and yourself to give our insights on that. So thank you.
Perfect. Travis, yourself?
No, very well said. by Janelle, and I echo Mark, your points earlier. It's great to kind of share thoughts with everybody here. Even you, Suki, who of course, has a history of making bad placements. But I think what we can all take from that is everybody makes mistakes. And I really appreciate you inviting me, Suki.
You're welcome. Craig, yourself?
Yeah, maybe just to say, it's important for everybody on the call to remember how important we are in the economy and the role our industry plays in helping people find jobs, careers, and things they want to do, and companies find the outcomes and drive the outcomes they're looking for. So I just think it's important as an industry, we always stand up and remember the important work we do on a daily basis. And again, I'm always happy to be with everyone here and share some insights and learn from each other. And every time I'm on these calls, I have 5 new analogies from Mark that I can use. They don't always work in Canada, but I try. So,
Mark, yourself?
Always great to be on these panels, and thank you for allowing me to be me. I know, Suki, how you had to get me on these because I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, so to speak. But another fantastic session, all pearls of wisdom from the rest of the crew on the call. And to tie in with what Craig said, for those of you, as I call it, the sharp end of the business, our recruiters, our sales folk, our admin people, our IT guys and gals, now stay the course. Business needs us. They can't operate without us. And you know what? Believe in this. We are not participants of this recession. Thank you, everybody. Over and out from me.
Brilliant. I've seen there's more questions that have come through. So what I'll do is here you go. Okay, let's quickly take this question if you guys have time. Do you think it's beneficial to offer a discounted rate for your recruitment services, or keep your typical fee and focus on clients that can afford those fees? Brilliant. Last question. Who wants to take it?
I'll just say this. It ties in with what Craig, Travis, and Janelle said, I guess. It's about cost to serve. It's that whatever you take each opportunity on merit, and you teach your people to make the most of the opportunity and weigh up time to serve. In other words, what's it going to take for me to find the people to fill the role? If they're looking for something that doesn't exist, they're going to have to pay more because it's going to take a lot more time. If I can find these people, as Travis said, overnight, then look at it, but obviously negotiate a decent fee. We don't want to be in the business of giving a cheap and nasty. So cost to serve.
Perfect. Travis, anything to add?
Negotiating is not discounting. So I agree with Mark.
Craig?
Nope. What Mark, Travis said it well.
Perfect. And Janelle, anything to add to that one?
No, they're absolutely right.
Perfect. Okay, so I will go back and answer some of those other questions. Guys, thank you ever so much. Now, if anybody wants to get hold of you guys, can they reach out to you via LinkedIn?
Sure.
Perfect. And I will send out the recording to everybody that's registered with this, because I know some people joined late. Guys, thank you ever so much. Really appreciate your time today. See ya.